Good morning, and welcome to AgEagle's first Hemp Town Hall virtual event. My name is Michael Droz, and I am Chief Executive Officer of AgEagle Aerial Systems. On behalf of everyone at AgEagle, I'd like to thank you for choosing to join us today for what we expect will be a very insightful program. It is our greatest hope that by the end of today's discussions, you have a much clearer perspective on what steps many progressive states and tribal nations are taking to ensure that the U.S. hemp industry thrives and prospers for many years to come. A bit about my background. Prior to joining AgEagle, I actually was a hemp farmer, responsible for running a fairly sizable hemp farm, as well as major CBD extraction and ag processing facility. Prior to that, I was the president of the Ag Bio division for Eurofins, a company that does seed and plant testing, including hemp seed sexing and CBD testing. I was actually the one who started the hemp testing business for Eurofins, and I'm very proud of the role I played in helping Eurofins become the U.S. leader in hemp testing. With the experience I've gained by working with the hemp supply chain, literally from the ground up, I have a great appreciation of the challenges of growing hemp, and even greater respect for how states and local and tribal agencies, growers, and other industry stakeholders are working together to overcome these challenges. To help guide us through our events program today, I'm pleased to introduce my Aggie colleague, Steve Turetsky, who will be serving as our lead moderator today. Like me, Steve was also a hemp farmer, and like me, he spent many long days tending to his hemp fields. He also happens to be one of the nation's leading voices of authority and subject matter experts on hemp production and has consulted with hemp farming operations around the world, sharing his knowledge and passion for the industry. In fact, it's how Steve and I first met and why I recruited Steve to AgEagle. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the virtual stage. Why don't you take it from here?
Hey, Michael. Thanks so much. It's great to be here. I couldn't help but think about how jealous I am of the hemp farmers that have all these new pro-business regulations coming in from the USDA. We're going to learn about a lot of those today. So I'm here to kind of be your rodeo clown and host of festivities here. These webinars are always fun, and I'm sure we'll have some good times with the live feeds, but I'm hoping it'll be a smooth show and everyone will learn something. To give you a bit of the background of today, we're going to be taking you around the country through multiple states, looking at hemp regulators and kind of giving you a perspective from the ground floor of the industry. Typically on these educational events, we're always hearing about the commercial side of things, specifically with plant touching and doing business along the supply chain. But really, what we think is important here is to highlight the regulators and kind of the grassroots movement of these state regulations that are facilitating the growth of the industry. The regulators alongside those licensees and farmers are doing the dirty work day in and day out to move this industry forward. So we're going to be hearing from states like Colorado and Kentucky, some of the states that have been in the industry for quite a while here and really started the show. And then we're going to be looking at states like Florida and Iowa, who come to this as year one, year two, learning from lessons that have become in the past and trying to move this thing even better forward. We're also going to be talking with some Native American tribes to understand the opportunities that exist in the tribal nations and how they're taking advantage of easing hemp regulations. So with that being said, just a few housekeeping items before we introduce our first speaker. There's a Q&A at the bottom here. You can ask questions in there, and myself as well as the panelists will be able to see and interact with that. And we'll try to make sure that we check on that at the end of each interview to make sure that we can get some of those questions answered. I want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors of today's event. We have MicaSense joining us, and we'll hear from them a little bit later, as well as CAI. And we're excited to have them, and thank you for joining us today. Let's see if I have any other notes. Oh, another note that's interesting and important to note. Some of you might be hemp farmers from different states. We're going to be hearing about state regulations today. It's good to note that although the USDA regulations are going live at the end of March, every state has a different set of nuance to these regulations, some more significant than others. So when you hear us talking with some of these speakers today from certain states, don't take that as the Bible or as the go forward strategy. Make sure you check with your state regulators to make sure that you have the right information and going forward in the proper way. So I think that covers all the housekeeping. We're going to get to the content. It's going to, like I said, it's going to be a sprint. So buckle up and get ready. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Brian Kuntz from the state of Colorado. Let's see. Brian, if you want to unmute and get your video on, let these people see you. There he is.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for inviting me to this. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you, Brian. Thanks so much. Brian, you are the hemp program manager for the state of Colorado. And you have a very important job, as Colorado does, as well as being the pioneer that really set this thing in motion. What is it, 5-6 years ago now?
Yeah.
So I'd love to start talking about the CHAMP initiative. If you could tell our viewers a little bit about that initiative and how that's been ushering in these new USDA recommendations and rules, and also how it's been, assisting working with business.
Yeah, Steve, absolutely. So around the same time I actually started this position, early 2019, we went under a very large stakeholder engagement process with 8 groups ranging from research and development and seed to cultivation to transportation to processing, manufacturing, banking, and insurance, testing, and basically got a total of over 200 stakeholders in these very specialized groups sat down and gathered deliverables. And really, the dual purpose of the CHAMP initiative, or the Colorado Hemp Advancement Management Plan, was to give us adequate input to create our state plan for USDA, or at least the first part of it, CHAMP, which was basically all up through the cultivation and transportation part, and then B, to produce the CHAMP report, which is yet to be released. Like a lot of things in the last year, it's one of the things that's been delayed, but I imagine that's going to be published within the next month or so. Don't hold me to that, but it should be pretty.
I won't hold you to it.
Yeah. And so what the CHAMP report is basically a blueprint of how best management practices, how the hemp industry has grown in Colorado, and how and what we see as important issues or foundations in each part of the supply chain.
Fantastic. Give us some teasers, if you wouldn't mind, of some key takeaways that you've learned from these businesses and some of the input that you've gotten while collecting all the data.
Well, I mean, probably one of the bigger ones is the industry did want they did want to pursue some sort of traceability system. One of the lack of direction, things that were not addressed by the USDA was transportation, and I think most people would agree that in various states and in the industry, that transportation of hemp, although it's legal now after the 2018 Farm Bill in the states, it's still a big issue, and it's very difficult for law enforcement, and without the traceability system really goes beyond just helping law enforcement, but it ensures consumer protection for all the way from the time where the crop's produced to the time it's processed and manufactured and goes out on the shelves. So we've taken under we've really kind of gone with the traceability system and tried to we're starting to develop clickable prototypes, and we recently engaged a survey with the states to basically find out what the other interest in states was, and fortunately we found out there is a lot of interest. That's the good news. The good news is there's a lot of interest. The bad news is there's not necessarily that many resources. I think most states are limited on financial resources. Those are able to provide human resources are willing to do so, but that seems to be like the biggest holding block, because it's a big effort. It's a national effort to try to have a national system that works for everybody.
Regarding transportation of goods, and because I think so you got right, and when you're talking about transportation, you're talking about after the harvest, right? So biomass onward. You're talking about CBD products as well.
Yes, yeah, everything. So when the biomass leaves the farm and goes to the processor, and then or extraction occurs or whatever the processing method is after that, and to the time where it goes to a manufacturer, gets put into different products.
Mhm. Have you seen any? I guess one of the things that's interesting is every state has a little bit of a different hemp regulation, and most states now, have some sort of hemp regulations in place. I'm sure there's still issues when Colorado material is leaving out of state and heads to a state that might not have regulations in place yet, or have different regulations. Does that seem to be an issue too?
That's largely true. There's some states have like for example, one of our coast states, Texas, they have requirements that a state produced manifest is with the that's their requirement. That's not our requirement. That's not a lot of other states' requirements. So again, it gets confusing. The states have different requirements for hemp going through their state. It gets confusing for law enforcement, and that's kind of why at least we've always advocated for some sort of direction, national direction on requirements for hemp. I think most people understand it's a good idea to have a manifest, to have a certificate of analysis, to have a certificate for point of origin. Those kind of things usually set well with transportation, but they're certainly not ironclad.
So is that a spot that you want to see increased USDA input going forward, right? Because at the moment, I don't believe this new final rules has anything for interstate transportation or kind of this national framework.
I think that would be useful. I know that USDA has talked about different, the need for that, and they just haven't developed anything further than really when after it's harvested and leaves the farm.
Sure.
And that's what our program deals with. The Department of Ag, we deal with the cultivation part of it, and with the farm commodities, the sale of it. But we don't, unlike some other states that regulate also processing and whatnot. That goes in Colorado, goes to a different department, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And so they regulate all the labs and the processors. They recently passed laws in our state. They'll go into effect by April to certify third-party labs or additional labs to hemp testing, so we can ramp up our testing for next year, do 100% testing.
Yeah, that's the next thing I was actually going to ask you about. One of these other challenges and bottlenecks with scaling the regulation side seems to be around sampling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to achieve 100% sampling in our state's a huge lift, considering the amount of growers we have and how well established the industry is and how large the state is. So we did get legislative approval last year to start a third-party sampling certification program. That individual just started this month on the 1st. They're currently developing the requirements for certification for basically agents, people who can demonstrate knowledge through testing and get a registration card or a license to go out and collect samples per our guidelines or USDA guidelines. And in addition to recruiting those folks and getting them licensed, the Department of Public Health Environment did just create those rules I was talking about, and because currently, historically we've tested between 25 and this last year's a little better, closer to 40% of all registrants. But of course, now that needs to be amped up to 100%. It's going to be necessary to recruit labs outside of our own lab. I mean, our lab for the last couple of years has just been up to its ears in hemp. Starting in August and going through October. So it
all happens at once. It's just like a tidal wave.
Yes, exactly. It's hard to plan for, and I envision it's going to be very hard for the private labs to do so as well. It's hard to plan for through a whole year and figure out a way to make things work for just 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. Let's turn to some of the good things that came out of the current USDA final regs. What are you happy with? What do you think were some big wins for Colorado in the country?
There are some very good things that came out of it. Us and other states had advocated for the 30-day window for sampling prior to, or before, collecting samples before harvest versus 15. We got that. Colorado has always felt like our 0.5% negligence was kind of low. I mean, ever since our rules have been in place, we've been at 1%, and it's hard enough to, as a regulatory agency, to do enforcement for for 1% as a threshold for negligence versus lowering it to half that. So we were very excited about that. Although we're glad that they suspended the DEA certification for labs, or enforcement of that, until the end of next year. We're still concerned about that. We'd like to see that change a little bit, but absolutely. The DEA did show some flexibility, and of course, another thing we're very happy about is the remediation aspect. Where a grower can now ask for remediated sampling if their crop comes back hot, and has an option to blend the crop or remove the flower and have it retested. And we're very happy about that. We advocated for maybe even more flexibility in that area, but those are all good signs. And those are all fantastic signs that the USDA listened to the comments in the first comment period, the second comment period, and took some of them to heart.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. Have you seen that trickle down into like positive sentiment from the farming community too? Because I know like last year was a tough year. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world. We saw hemp cultivation drop a little bit. I feel like just the sentiment that I've been seeing is more positivity, stability in the supply chain now, stability in pricing, and maybe increased production with a little more flexibility in the regulations.
I believe so. I mean, I hope so. I mean, it's really hard to tell definitively yet, but obviously, our stakeholders have been very happy with the fact that that the USDA did take into consideration what we had advocated for and other states had. And I think that was. I think you're correct, Steve. I think that with how cumbersome or how inflexible this final rule was, that certainly must have had some sort of effect last year on the drop in hemp production. Although I really do believe it was mostly due to overproduction in 2019 and other things. But I think you're absolutely right. I'm hopefully now that the rule is final and there appears to be some more flexibility. I'm very hopeful, crossing my fingers, that the hemp industry will become more steady. It's kind of been a roller coaster, for us ever since the program started in 2014. It's grown steadily. It's almost doubled every year.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2019, it really had unrealistic, unsustained growth. By growing almost 3 times. And so last year we saw that cut in half, or a little bit more than half. So we're still better off than we were in 2018. And I'm hoping that it kind of stays steady for everybody, for the whole industry.
What do you think? What do you think the industry needs in terms of different solutions, commercial applications, things that would help allow the industry commercially to continue to grow in the right direction? Both, I think there's 2 answers there. One on the industrial hemp side, fiber applications, and then also cannabinoid applications.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. For one, there still needs to be improvements in banking and insurance. Crop insurance, and making it easier to bank. That affects all sides of the industry, and that's of course something that came out in our stakeholder engagement group, and we're hoping that becomes more favorable now that the farm bill or the rule is final, and that all states have to be on the same playing level by January 1. Obviously, everybody's been chasing the cannabinoid industry, and that's, in Colorado, that's been over 60%, probably closer to 70% what folks are growing for. And one of our governor's initiatives is to create more diverse uses of hemp outside of that. So one thing we entered into last year was a Patagonia project to produce domestically organically grown hemp clothing. So I think projects like that are going to be beneficial. I also, believe that, some of the other alternative uses, polymers or hemp plastics are useful, but it really needs to be, incorporated. I think what really needs is the grain. I think long-term range, I think most states, at least my observation when I was in the Midwest, is that's what they're hoping for is, when it's, when you can put it in your Cheerios, that's when hemp farming is really going to take off.
That's a great point. And I think along with the industrial applications, I think scaling of those farming operations is going to be really important too, because I feel like that's one area where pricing, needs to come down in order to compete if we're going to put hemp in Cheerios, right?
Yeah,
As opposed to grain or wheat. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, yeah, there needs to be more infrastructure. In our state, we really beefed up in the last 2 years processors a lot, but it depends on what you're processing for. I mean, if you're going to do clothing for Patagonia, then you need, decortification equipment and and good equipment. You need to have good people from, weavers from China or good connections, and you need to have equipment here.
Right.
Necessity. So anyway, those are some of the things we've been looking into, and our marketing division's also been helping us with that. Trying to bring those pieces together to, absolutely, increase the infrastructure.
Makes sense. Well, we only have about 30 seconds left with you. Any parting words or advice for regulators that might be on from other states or farmers that are heading into this season?
Oh, well, I mean, I obviously I wish the hemp growers success, and I think those who stick with it will see it. As far as the other regulators are concerned, it's a great group. I always want to pay kudos to Doris Hamilton for keeping the state regulator group together. It's unfortunate we haven't been able to meet for a couple of years because of the COVID. But we have a big event coming up, NOCO, the Northern Colorado Hemp event coming up. It's the biggest hemp expo in the country, coming up on the 25th and the 26th and the 27th of this month. So I encourage everybody to check in on that. And that's about all I have. Thank you for having me on here, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody else.
Great. Brian, thanks so much. We're going to stay tuned for the Champ Report. Can't wait for it to be released.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, you too.
All right. Thanks. All right. Thanks so much to Brian Coons of Colorado for joining us this morning and kicking things off. That was really informative. Next, we're going to hear from CAI, one of our sponsors. We have Nick Armstrong joining us. CAI is a newbie to the cannabis industry, so welcome, Nick. You're in for quite the ride, as many on the phone know. How are you this morning?
I'm well, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I'd love for you to give us some insight on what CAI does and give us kind of the background of how you guys decided to take your experience in pharma and bring it into the cannabis industry.
Sure. So CAI actually started with a handful of Navy vets that came out and decided to get into the pharma and the biotechnology industry. And today, 25 years later, we're now a global employee-owned company with 600 employees around the world. And our ultimate goal is to really help clients get those therapies to market, get their products out to market in a ever evolving regulatory landscape, right? And I'll say that 25 years ago, when we got into the biotech industry, it was definitely in its infancy, right? It was maturing as we go. Everyone was trying to figure out what the FDA wanted. The FDA is trying to figure out how to partner with industry to get therapies to market. And we were there. We've kind of come up through the ranks with pharma, with biotech as we go through this. And at the end of the day, what we're really looking at doing is making a company operationally ready from day one when they're ready to get into the market in mostly in a regulated environment.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, like we heard from Brian, USDA has long been an ally of the cultivation side of the industry. We have CDPHE and other state regulations that are helping on that downstream side. But for the most part, people are kind of flying blind still in terms of operational readiness and compliance. Is that what you're seeing too?
Oh no, absolutely. So on the cultivation side and with their USDA, that has kind of reached a point of maturity. It's well understood. But as we go further down the supply chain, the regulations are quite unclear, right? And so processors are trying to figure out kind of what's coming next, and that's where we really get into not only partner with processors, but also partnering with regulatory bodies, standard setting committees, and those pieces to kind of bring both parties together for that level of understanding.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know you had mentioned when we were kind of planning for this that you guys are a member of Cannabis D37 committee. You want to tell us a little bit about that? And I think it dovetails into kind of how quality might lead to compliance in our industry.
Yeah, so the ASTM D37 committee it's a standards organization, right? And so when regulators are looking at how to approach a specific market, they really rely on thought leadership from the standards organizations and professional organizations to kind of help influence those position papers and whatnot that the agencies come out with. So specifically, we sit within the quality management system subcommittee. And I think what's interesting there is a lot of that subcommittee is on the cultivation side. We actually have brought in our thought leadership from the manufacturing and processing side. So as that standard organization continues to develop various position papers, thought leadership, and whatnot, the regulators really key in and listen on that. And what we're really trying to approach here is your quality management system, what you're producing, all the testing and everything, that's a demonstration, right? You're running an outstanding operation. You've got quality built into every piece that you're doing, and everything after that is just a display of those successes that you have. So again, not only helping on the regulatory side, but also helping clients understand where they're going with that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm for one very excited that you guys have decided to jump in. I think it shows that the industry is at a maturity level where big business and people that have facilitated bigger business and bigger industries in the past are ready to treat this like a real industry as it is. So that's really exciting. So with our final minute here, tell our viewers just where they can reach you if they want to reach out and learn more about what you guys are trying to build in the hemp space.
Yeah, absolutely. So cagents.com is our website. Reach out through there with us or my contact information that's in here. But what we're really looking at partnering with operators, partnering with processors as we go through to get them out the gate. First of all, where the industry is reaching a point where profits no longer cover problems. You've got to get in front of problems early. We've done that with biotech and pharma for the last 25 years, right? So we have that ability there. And additionally, reaching out and working with state agencies, right? Understanding that thought leadership behind how was this done in other industries and how can we leverage that information and thought leadership into this.
That's fantastic. The takeaway there, don't let profits hide problems. I love that. That's great stuff. Thanks for your knowledge and we appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Nick. All right, Nick Armstrong from CAI, thanks so much. We're going to move right along here. Our next interview is going to be with Holly Bell from Florida. To moderate that interview, we have a guest moderator, Barrett Mooney, joining us. Barrett Mooney is the Director of Technology Investments at Wilbur Ellis and also the Chairman of the Board of AgEagle. We're happy you're here joining us, Barrett.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me.
And I'll let you and Holly kick it off. Thanks, guys.
All right. Holly, thanks. I wanted to kind of start by introducing Holly. Holly had a career in banking and financial services and then consulted in the cannabis business and issues in a number of states. She worked to build infrastructure to support the creation of Tennessee's cannabis industry following the passage of that state's industrial hemp legislation. A native of Indiana with family roots in Northeast Florida, a commonality we share, Holly earned a bachelor's degree in agricultural economics from Purdue University. In her role as director of cannabis, Holly oversees the development of rules, works directly with scientific experts, and ensures Commissioner Nikki Fried's vision for cannabis in Florida continues moving forward. She works closely with the Department's Division of Plant Industry, Food Safety, and AES on developing Florida's hemp industry, including the production, processing, inspecting, and manufacturing of industrial hemp. She also works with the Florida Department of Health as it relates to the medical marijuana edibles and consumer issues. Holly works closely with the Commissioner's Industrial Hemp and Medical Marijuana Advisory Committees, as well as the Hemp Advisory Council. So welcome, Holly, and thanks for joining us today. I think you might be on mute there, Holly.
There we go. Sorry.
That's quite all right.
I have to let you all know my giant schnauzer has decided to get rowdy all of a sudden. So apologies if you hear him, but thank you for having me today.
Thanks for being here. And dog problems, not an issue. We will take the excitement as it comes here. But I wanted to kick it off with kind of the first question around Florida being a fairly large agricultural state with a lot of agricultural commodities produced in Florida. What was the impetus for Florida joining the hemp industry, right? I mean, supporting seasoned and scaled farmers, as it transitions or embraces an additional crop to other traditional Florida crops?
Right, great question. So Commissioner Fried really heard the voice of the farmers down here. We have a lot of what I would call specialty farmers that grow on raised beds, tomatoes, watermelons, blueberries. And a lot of that has gone south of the border because of some trade issues. So they're struggling, and she needed to find some alternative crops for them. In addition, the citrus orchards that we've had have suffered a lot of disease from the greening and canker, and they're not producing like they used to. So finding an alternative for farmers in one crop that could help several different groups was something really important to her. And with the passing of the Farm Bill and the just explosion of CBD on the market down here, she understood that that was a viable option, and that's where the vision came from and where we got it all started.
Seems like a great transition plan. And sort of speaking of problems, as you kind of went into some of the problems in other industries, understanding seed supply and quality as it relates to Florida, particularly climate-wise, what are you seeing as possibilities for Florida, given the tropical nature? Considering of other states that have come before in hemp production, we're not really of the same soil types and the same climate. Do you see and what do you see as the seed production and quality issues in Florida?
So the genetics is an issue, and it's an issue we work on constantly. We had the University of Florida and Florida A&M University, we call FAMU, both have led the charge here in getting that research done. And they've been researching it a little over 2 years and have found a lot of good genetics that are going to work here in our various regions. We actually vary from like zone 8 all the way to zone 10 in planting. So from a southern zone to a subtropical zone. And what is needed in each of those zones varies seed-wise. So what's working in northern Florida doesn't necessarily work in central Florida, and it doesn't necessarily work in southern Florida. So we're developing strains that work in all the regions. And with that, what we're finding is cloning is probably the best option right now that we have. And that's working really well for a lot of the farmers. So we also are finding that in the various regions, depending on how they're growing and what they're planting, they're getting more than one grow season out of the crop. So one of the things that everybody doesn't think about in Florida that we're facing is our amount of light in the day. And as we all know, hemp is a very light sensitive plant. So we don't actually have a good light period here in Florida, believe it or not. We have short days, and that presents a lot of problems with finding varieties that grow really well in all of Florida. So we're working on that too in the university programs. And we're starting to see some great solutions that will work here in Florida.
That brings up an interesting point around kind of the interaction between commercial business, university research, maybe even third-party NGO style research. How are you balancing sort of those collaborations, or what, I guess, what frameworks are there currently in Florida for those collaborations?
So great question, Barrett. One of the things that our bill allowed for was collaboration with universities and the private individual. So in our pilot program, which originally was the first two, FAMU and UF, has now expanded to all universities here as of 2019 in Florida. They go out and find what I call private partners and form an alliance or a joint agreement. And the farmer, we're actually growing and researching on actual farms in various locations. And we're up to 90 some permits that we've issued for our pilot program. So those are 90 different locations where we're growing throughout the state on different soil types, different climates, different light, different inside, outside, all different things. So they then have the ability to have an approved seed or approved clone, propagule, whatever you want to call it. And then we keep that on a list out on our website, and those are allowed to be planted in the state of Florida. We have two requirements. It either has to come from a pilot program partnership here in Florida, or it must be a certified seed or clone. And we define that by a OSCA member doing that here in the state of Florida.
So when it comes to certified seeds as part of some of these research trials and research relationships, how are you all working out the kinks on bad actors, let's say, in the industry when it comes to seed distribution and accountability on seed production? Is there a state regulation, or is there a framework in place that you all are already using that is really wrapped around making sure the quality and the quantity of what's being distributed meets the requirements?
Yes. So we have a seed rule, and our seed rule clearly defines that germination, and we have all kinds of testing you've got to go through. If you're a dealer and you're running it through the pilot program, you have to hit all of those gates before we will say, yes, you did your due diligence in it, you can approve it and put it out there. So we are very strict on that. We do monitor that. We do go out and inspect labels and inspect what seed dealers are selling in the state of Florida for compliance with our rule.
Okay, so there is a full inspection. And
There
you'd
is.
mentioned earlier photosensitivity in the photo period of hemp, and I kind of wanted to ask a couple of questions around that. I mean, one of the big things in looking at southern latitudes, which gives us a lot of hope as far as industry, is year-round production. Something that in other states you couldn't do in Florida. Does it look like we would actually see year-round CBD hemp farming? Is that a possibility there?
I think so. We've got it going on inside now. I have about a handful of nurseries, inside grows, that are doing constant production. And I do see the central part of the state and on south having 2 to 3 crops a year that they can do. I don't believe we're probably going to be able to do that in northern Florida, north of what I would call I-10 in that Swanee Valley area. For any of you that know Florida, the weather just dips down a little too cold probably, but I do see that happening from Ocala south. I think we'll be able to get 2 to 3 grows a year.
Sounds right. Sounds right to me. As a Florida Gator myself, I'd figure Gainesville is the cutoff,
Right.
since Gainesville seems like the center of the universe, at least for people that went to the University of Florida.
Well, they kind of
so-
call Orlando the freeze zone here in Florida.
That's right. So in that productivity, there's quite a bit of specialty crops already in Florida: ornamental flowers, greenhouse cucumbers, greenhouse tomatoes. Do you see hemp as bolstering, the traditional seasoned farmer, or bringing new farmers into production of hemp in the state? I mean, is this a growth opportunity to bring more people into the agricultural landscape that is such a big part of Florida and its GDP, or do you see this as really just an additional commodity overall that's going to help the traditional seasoned farmers in Florida sort of take advantage of new opportunities?
Right. So I see it as both. And the reason I see it as both is because I get calls on both, and I've visited facilities and I know what permits are going out. So we have an influx of new business coming in because of that. People actually buying land, starting to grow hemp here, and becoming Florida farmers. Then I also have the type of farmer you just talked about, or nursery person who has been growing ornamentals inside or some kind of vegetable, and they're just adding this to what they're doing. So an example of that is I was down in Fort Pierce, Florida, which is just a little south of Orlando, and we were actually doing a Fox News segment on hemp, and it aired nationally, which was great for all of us. So one of the things that I observed and we filmed while we were there is you've got 2 greenhouses growing hemp, and then you've got 2 to 3 growing still ornamentals. Beautiful nursery full of ferns. So they're actually maybe not having as much production on the ornamentals and supplementing it with hemp because they weren't selling as many ornamentals. So this gives them an opportunity to add something else in to keep their greenhouses at capacity.
That's fantastic, fantastic diversity and additional protection. I mean, I think one of the follow-ups to that then is as the crop is being produced, it eventually needs to be harvested and then processed. What's Florida's strategy around the license and inspection of processors, as far as the first grow season that's coming to an end here?
Okay, so we did it a little different. We did it a little backwards, some people thought, and they called me and said, "What are you thinking? What are you doing?" So we regulate the whole industry here in Florida, and I'm over the whole industry. So that's unique, where there's only 2 or 3 of us that do that. So we have 5 rules that regulate the hemp industry. We actually did the cultivation rule very last. I had the first part of it set up to go in January. So I licensed processors, manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, and retailers immediately. I had thousands of retailers. I had over 200 manufacturers. I had about 15 processors. And somebody said to me, "Why are you doing that? There's no hemp in Florida." I said, "They can pull it over the line. There's plenty of biomass hemp that can be bought up in Kentucky, you name it, anywhere else. I want them to bring it down. I want them to get started. I want them to have that pump prime so that they're cash flowing and knowing what to do and getting their businesses up and going." Then when my first harvest happens, which is around June, those farmers will have a viable source that's already up and going to go buy their hemp. And that's what we experienced. So that's kind of how we set it up here. We have our food safety division inspect everything after it leaves the farm, and they issue a food safety hemp permit for that. And we do require some high standards here in Florida, but we are really concerned about anything that is ingested and protecting the consumer. So we do take it to a food quality GNP type standard here in Florida. And the commissioner was very adamant about that, because prior to getting the regulations in place, we had some incidences that were very upsetting and sad where people were ingesting things and ending up in the hospital. So we're very diligent about monitoring the processing, manufacturing, and retailing of the product here in Florida.
Thank you very much. I believe that's about the time we have for questions today. I want to thank Holly for joining us and AgEagle for having the both of us here, and look forward to the rest of the presentations for today. So thank you very much, Holly, and everyone at AgEagle and the team.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Barrett and Holly, thanks so much. It was a lively discussion. I learned a lot and really appreciate your guys' time. We're going to keep going with content if you guys are ready. Next guest is Doris Hamilton, joining us from the state of Kentucky. Welcome to the stage, Doris.
Hi,
Doris. So Doris is the hemp program manager for the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. She's been an integral part of implementation in the research pilot program at KDA since the beginning, and has served the local community for 11 years working with the County Farm Bureau organization, and has leadership roles in the Cattlemen's Association, Cooperative Extension Service, and the Farm Bureau. And Brian gave you kudos for keeping the Regulator group together too. So we appreciate your work, and thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So, one thing that I wanted to start with when we were having our planning calls, you made a really good point that even some of my language in defining hemp, industrial hemp, cannabis, biomass, all of these terms was still a little bit muddy. And I've been doing this for, a decade, and you were totally right. So if I'm still making mistakes, I know there's a lot of people out there still making mistakes. So tell me a little bit about, how you like to put definitions on some of these different sections of hemp and different use cases, and how that has either, caused confusion or led to, more education necessary in getting people all aligned to what we're talking about.
Right, Steve. So when you mention you're making mistakes, so it doesn't become a mistake until they change the definition, right? So hemp is a new term that we just heard about in 2013. And then 2014, when that farm bill passed, the definition was industrial hemp. So we all were trained to use the word industrial hemp. And then the word industrial seemed to be misunderstood. And you saw some regulators and some agencies and some folks say, oh no, the word industrial means, so they started trying to tack their own definitions on that. And we're saying industrial means only fiber and only grain. Some of the national agencies were saying that, the federal agencies, although that was not defined in federal law. Industrial hemp was defined based on the THC content at 0.3 or less, and that was all. It did not, it said, it did not say that it had to be used for grain and fiber, and that it could not include floral material. So I think that's the reason why in 2018 they changed the definition on us. And the word industrial is completely removed from the definitions in law on the federal level. So federal laws only refer to hemp, and the word industrial is no longer involved in that at all. So in Kentucky, we're still scrubbing our rules and our regulations and our forms to remove that word industrial off of that to catch up to the new definition in the 2018 Farm Bill. So, and we talked about some of the other confusion. For years and years, we were getting calls talking about hemp oil. Hemp oil means one thing to one person and something completely different to another person, especially in the very beginning. The word hemp oil should be referred to the seed oil. It is an oilseed crop, so you would expect that to be the seed oil. But a lot of times the word hemp oil was used and labeled as a way of getting the extract or the essential oils around regulation. So it was a bit intentional by parts of the industry to misuse that term. But so hemp oil was another bear that people still ask about things, and you have to stop them and ask them, what are they referring to when they use that term hemp oil? You're referring to extracts from the floral material, or are you talking about the oil that's being compressed from the seed and extracted from the seed? But let's see, what was the other one we were talking about? Oh, the word biomass. So
the other one I wanted to talk about is that's the big one in terms of quality control, and then commoditizing this, the core that furnishes the rest of the supply chain.
Right. So the word biomass, if you look it up in the dictionary, Webster's dictionary, it's still, the word biomass has traditionally and always in agricultural meant plant material used to generate energy. My first recollection of the word biomass to refer to hemp floral material was it was used as a means of kind of hiding what was really in the shipment that was they were trying to import or export. So, but it's caught on in the industry, and so now everybody recognizes the term biomass as it's typically, it could be any kind of plant material. Though when you refer to biomass, it may include stem and stalk, and it may not. And so, again, it's another term that there needs to be better explanation. But at the same time, we are seeing some groups that are defining that as far as when I use the word biomass in my documents, like Hemp Benchmarks, who releases prices and market characteristics, they actually define biomass in their publications now. And we find that the USDA even used the term biomass in the final rule. So it is becoming more widely used, and but there's so many different levels of biomass. Is it the entire plant, or is it just the floral material with all stems removed? And
What do you typically what would you recommend to a farmer that is trying to sell biomass into the market in terms of compliance documents that should accomplish or should tag on to it, and also general quality for what you think should be referred to as that commodity as CBD biomass?
so any owner of biomass that's looking to market it, the first thing that they will be asked for, or should be asked for, would be a document from their Department of Agriculture or their licensing agency that proves that it was a legal crop and that it has been tested for compliance and has been released for sale and market. If in their state or their area an actual sample was not taken of that particular lot of hemp, but it was omitted due to performance-based testing standards, then they should still have some sort of release form and recognition that they grew a crop and it's considered legal and it's been released for sale. And that those documents are going to look a little different in every state, but that would be the primary first step. And then next, they're going to need a certificate of analysis, not something that we would produce based on a pre-harvest sample that says, hey, it's legal, you can sell it, because we're not telling them the cannabinoid content. We're not telling them any of those other qualities. So most buyers are going to want a certificate of analysis that shows the cannabinoid profiles, and they're going to want to sample in most cases. A lot of companies are going to want to take a sample of it and maybe even run extraction, because if you test for example, heavy metals in just the floral material, they may not pick up, they may be non-detect in the floral material, but once they extract and perform the extraction protocol, everything is concentrated, and then they may find that there are heavy metals and that kind of thing. So most of your larger buyers are going to be wanting a sample so that they can do an extraction run and that they can actually test and look at for those impurities on their own after it's been concentrated into an extract.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, we've definitely seen that. Is there anything, have you heard any issues in terms of biomass cultivation of specific metals that people are picking up from hemp in the soil, or I guess, even extending to different types of pests that have been issues in the crop?
We are not seeing much in the way of problems with heavy metals. I have heard of isolated cases where lead was detected, but we're not seeing much problem of that. There's lots of talk of it, but I've not seen lots of evidence.
That's
of
great.
it being a problem, which is, that's good.
Have you guys seen any insect pressure that is coming from, your usually pressuring other crops, or now, coming into hemp?
There is insect pressure on hemp. And the longer that we grow hemp in the state of Kentucky, the more we find that there are more pests that are finding it to be a suitable host plant to feed on. But back to your question, the most prevalent impurity that we see and that we hear about is pesticides. So that can be a problem if you're not following properly labeled pesticides and using those correctly. Using off-label pesticides is a very bad idea and illegal.
Right.
But yeah, exactly. But we do see, I guess the main pest that we see as far as insect pressure is the corn earworm. And it tends to get into the coleus of the plant and just eat through those flowers.
Oh yeah, I've dealt with that. We have caterpillars in Colorado, and they'll come right in there, and it looks like bud rot, and the bud just falls right off.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's bringing.
There's also
it's giving me nightmares. I'm getting flashbacks right now. I'm sweating.
Yeah. There's also a lot of diseases in hemp as well. And for years, people have continued to say that hemp doesn't need fertilizer, it doesn't need herbicides, it doesn't need pesticides, because there are no insects that feed on it. There's no diseases, but But you know, the more we work with that plant, the more we find that there are lots of diseases in hemp, and some varieties are more disease resistant than others. We have some amazing researchers here at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture that work on, you know, funguses and other types of disease, bacterial diseases, and it is critical, and we've seen total crop failures from leaf spot type diseses.
And thank you for smashing that myth. I think that's something that I've heard a lot of too. It's like water and sunshine, that's all you need. No, and this is a normal crop like anything else.
Yes, well, I tease people to say, you know, it's not a miracle crop, but I still see on company websites, companies that claim to be multi-billion-dollar companies that are international companies, and their headline says, hemp, a miracle crop. It does not need fertilizer. It does not need water. You know, I thought we were past that, but it is a normal agricultural crop that requires some level of water and some level of care, and it requires fertility. And there are, you know, there are pests that will destroy the crop.
Yeah, absolutely. People have to be careful. What other advice do you have kind of going forward? What do you see the industry kind of moving in the next year or two? And how do you think the industry continues to grow from here?
So advice for who? Advice for growers, advice for...
Yeah, let's do a great advice for growers and businesses, yeah.
You know, the take-home message for growers, Brian touched on this overproduction just a little bit, but I have to tell you, Steve, I read some numbers from Pan Exchange earlier this week. As a matter of fact, an economist friend of mine sent this along to me, and it was shocking to me. Pan Exchange is a very reputable analyst that puts out very respected numbers. And I'll read for you here just to make sure I do not misquote this. But of course, they estimated that 250,000 acres of hemp was grown in 2019. The majority of that was for cannabinoid production. And that is down to 103,000 in 2020. So we're thinking, okay, we know we had an overproduction in 2019. It self-corrected. 2020 went down to less than half. So those were all good points that Brian had already made. But based on Pan Exchange's estimates of a $4.7 billion industry, wow, that sounds big, doesn't it? We're like, it's going to be great. $4.7 billion cannabinoid market, you need less than 3,000 acres of hemp to generate that 4.7 billion. So now I'm like, less than 3,000 acres are needed to generate $4.7 billion in sales. So those numbers were alarming. So I went back and, you know, I thought, well, I look at this from the farmer's perspective and how many pounds to the acre he can yield and what percentage of CBD he's getting out of that. And if you look at a very low yield of 1,000 pounds of biomass per acre, most experienced growers with 2 or 3 years of experience, they're getting 2,000 and 3,000 pounds. But if you look at 1,000 pounds of biomass per acre, and that's mainly floral material, 7% CBD, which is, you know, pretty conservative, 70% efficiency rate on your extraction, you're getting 22.225 million milligrams of CBD per acre. That's enough for 2,000 people to take 30 milligrams of CBD every day for a year. So we've got to understand that this cannabinoid market is not going to need hundreds of thousands of acres. It's going to be based on smaller areas of production than what some may have thought originally. So so it's going to be a very competitive market. And as far as large numbers and big acreages, we're going to have to find those new opportunities and those emerging opportunities that are coming along with fiber and grain. Be careful and always have a contract before you plant. That's my main, you know,
also a good point.
Advice to growers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic opinion. I appreciate you sharing, because, you know, that's why we're doing this. On the commercial side, you know, those numbers, those market size numbers seem to be huge and the sky's the limit. But when it gets down to the brass tacks, the math and the potency, like you shared, it's sobering, and I think it shows, quality over quantity is probably how a lot of people on the CBD side of things will win at this. And then, like you mentioned, innovation on the fiber and grain side to find new opportunities that definitely need scaled inputs to make it happen. So fantastic. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Hope to chat again soon.
You're welcome. Thank you, Steve.
All right. Let's move on with our program. Thank you so much, Doris. Adrian is going to join us for our next session. How are you, Adrian?
I'm good. Good morning. How are you guys?
Doing good. I know that last section resonated with you as a fellow farmer.
It did. And I actually was lucky enough to be on that Pan Exchange webinar and listen to some of those statistics that she was just quoting. And it was really good information. So grateful to Pan Exchange for putting that stuff together. It's really helpful for farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll let you take it from here and talk to one of our sponsors, MicaSense and Drew Bastian.
Perfect. First of all, my name is Adrian Snow, and I am a hemp farmer in Nevada. So I have a lot of experience with farming different kinds of hemp, both CBD and industrial. I'm here to talk with Drew Bastian, who has a background in large-scale farming. He grew up on an Iowa farm that produced soy, corn, and hogs, so he's no stranger to the needs of farmers. He's been with the ag tech company MicaSense for 5 years and been on the front lines of creating new and innovative technological products to help farmers increase yields and profits, as well as improve the health and productivity of their fields. MicaSense is using drone technology, and Drew is online with us today to talk about how their technology is being used in the hemp industry. So good morning, Drew. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I appreciate that introduction.
You're welcome. So as a farmer, I sat and thought about some of the things that we've been up against and how your technology, and I got to see some of your slides and photos to better understand your products, how those can help us as farmers. So the first thing I thought of is really, you've got two different types of hemp farmers farming hemp in the US. We've got row croppers who are trying to produce high CBD hemp, and there's a lot of things at stake there. And then you've got industrial grain seed fiber hemp farmers.
Right.
So we've got really different needs in both of these groups, and often different sizes of just the geographical areas that are being farmed. So given those things, I would like to know, or I'm sure our listeners would like to know, how can your technology help both row croppers for high CBD as well as industrial hemp farmers farming hemp, just fiber grains hemp? So if you could get into that a little bit and share your technology with us with those things in mind.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, let me just go ahead and share my screen, and we can get into some examples that I hope the audience finds interesting. Let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see this, Adrian?
I can.
Great. Yeah, so I'll just add a few points to MicaSense as a company for context. So we were founded in 2014, recently acquired by AgEagle. We're headquartered and manufacture in Seattle, Washington. So we make multispectral cameras for use on drones, as you said, Adrian. And just for context, here's some pictures of a few of our cameras. The bottom one is the Ultim. It's a higher resolution multispectral camera with a thermal imager. And then above that is a more entry-level multispectral camera called the Red Edge MX. Above that is a light sensor that improves the quality of our data. As you're flying, it's capturing light and condition changes. So yeah, I mean, as you noted, seems like we're getting a lot more inquiries from hemp farmers over the last couple of years specifically. And it seems like the people who reach out to us, they're new to growing hemp, and they're really just curious if we have anything to offer that can I think ease the stress of growing a new crop.
Mm-hmm.
And And so generally we advise them that our cameras can do a few different things for them. And I've got them bulleted here. So weed identification is one, biomass density is another, which I know in the previous session was mentioned quite a bit, nutrient uptake, irrigation leaks, and then counting and classification of the field. And so I've got a few examples here. This one's a fiber hemp field that we flew in Illinois. And again, this was basically a newer grower that was just like, what can we're curious to know what the technology can do for us. And this is data from the Altum camera. We created an RGB composite, which is basically just a visible color image, similar to what you would see when you look out an airplane window at the field. And what we can do that's unique with our cameras is we can make custom composites with the different spectral bands. And some of the advantages to that is you can better differentiate between plant species. So if you're trying to distinguish between your crop and maybe weed pressure, that's where these indices and composites can be really useful. So I've got this little outlined area of the field here that I'm gonna get a little closer on. And in the right-hand side of your screen, you can see that a color image of that field, everything looks pretty much green. I mean, you've got different hues of green, but I think that's more correlated with nutrient variability and just like the health of the hemp plants. But when we're looking for weed pressure, it's pretty hard to discern. And then in the custom composite, you can see that the hemp crop is more of a yellow color, whereas the weeds, the grassy weeds that are occurring in that field are more of a red-orange color. So it's a good way of delineating between plant species, identifying weeds that maybe are going to cause problems for you. And then another thing we can do is so that was a composite. We can also create indices that are probably more familiar with the people on the call. So NDVI is an index that's pretty commonly batted around in the ag industry. This is actually a slightly different index called NDRE. And this is correlated with chlorophyll content and biomass of the field. And what we see on this map, which is kind of interesting, is you've got these yellow stripes across the field, which is basically indicating lower biomass and chlorophyll content. And what I would suspect, I don't know this for certain, but I would suspect that it's probably related to a nutrient application error. Maybe there was a clogged nozzle on a nutrient applicator, or maybe he was just making too wide of passes and he wasn't applying it across the entire field. And so you get these stripes across the field where the plants maybe aren't as growing as vigorously as they should be. So it's a way to either check your work or check third-party applicators and make sure that they're doing what you're paying them to do. Another thing that's kind of interesting on relation to biomass is you can see these funny patterns in this field. And the story behind that is basically they finished the field and they had a bunch of seed left, and they basically just made these patterns to get rid of the seed and also just test more dense seeding methods. And so it's a good way to kind of see how different densities perform on a particular field as well.
That's good to know, because as I look at this map and I think about what it costs if we're treating a field via crop dusting, that's a very expensive thing to do. So if my crop duster is missing a third of my field, essentially, as I look at this map, obviously this drone technology could pay for itself just by catching a couple errors like that. One of your bullet points, I know we're on a really tight timeline here, but one of your bullet points in a previous slide also discussed being able to catch water leaks. I know for row cropping, when we've got buried drip lines, most seasoned CBD hemp farmers know that our plants do not like to be steeped in water all the time. The roots like to dry out. So oftentimes not catching something like that could be a very, very expensive miss. So if that's something that could be caught with your technology, that is a money saving device. I know another question you're going to get that I'm just going to ask you so we get it answered is male female recognition, yay or nay?
Not with multispectral imagery alone, no. Haven't really had any success in that space.
Okay, and I don't think anybody has. So I just know that's a common question as people are trying to look for an answer in that. So I think you've probably really piqued the interest of farmers who are looking at this, not only in hemp, but in the other crops that they've got, just as we talked about this potential crop dusting error, if there's nutrients not on my field. How do people get in touch with you to find out more about your technology?
So they can either email sales@micasense.com, or you can just visit our website, micasense.com, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'd be happy to connect with you and stay in touch that way.
All right. Drew Bostian, we thank you and we thank MicaSense for sharing what you guys do with us.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian.
Thanks so much to you both, guys. I really appreciate it. One of the things that's definitely interesting and a theme that I'm seeing throughout is, with their sponsors and the speakers, the adoption of hemp as a mainstream industry, right? So looking at it from a lens of pharma compliance and operational readiness at CAI, attempting to, assist the hemp industry that is ready to grow up. And same thing with MicaSense, taking big ag techniques and bringing them into increased efficiencies as the industry attempts to scale where it needs to and continue to improve quality where it needs to. So really great stuff. Thank you both. I really appreciate it. So moving right along here, our next session I'm very excited for. We're going to be speaking with Jamie Fulmer of Bluestone Strategy Group and Nate Nash from the San Carlos Apache Tribe. You guys can jump on here and I'll introduce you. I've known these two in the industry for quite some time and actually helped with San Carlos's inaugural grow last year. I think there's some really interesting perspectives here from Indian country and explaining the trials and tribulations of starting a hemp program as both the regulator and the operator farmer. So I'm really excited for this conversation. You're both here. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
So we have Jamie Fulmer here from Bluestone Strategy Group. He's the chairman and CEO. Bluestone is a advisory group and consulting group that helps with economic development in Indian country, building businesses, helping with strategic planning, protecting tribal sovereignty. We also have Nate Nash, who is the economic development manager for the San Carlos Apache Tribe, and kind of a jack of all trades, wearing a bunch of different hats. And at one time was managing their hemp program last year even. So he's doing a little everything. So we appreciate you both. Jamie, I'd love to start with you and dive right into the opportunity that Bluestone is seeing on taking the hemp industry and facilitating it into Indian country. What are some of the things that you've been looking at as hemp as a possibility as an economic driver for tribes, and what's the feedback you've been getting from tribes?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the introduction, Steve. And as was mentioned, my name's Jamie Fulmer. I'm the CEO of Bluestone Strategy Group, and we're an advisory firm that works exclusively in Indian country. And Indian country is defined as the federally recognized tribes and their tribal trust lands, or their lands which they hold dominion and oversight authority over. And I think the one thing that becomes important is, when the when the Farm Bill, 2019 Farm Bill was passed, it passed hemp as allowable and legal, which gave under the federal, tribes have a government to government relationship with the federal government. So when the federal government made hemp legal federally, it allowed for tribes to participate as many of them in their trust and treaty relationships and in their governance relationship with the federal government have to follow and abide by federal laws. And so once that happened, it allowed for an opportunity for tribes to both govern and oversee hemp growing, and also to grow and develop an agricultural segment for the tribal community. And today, proud to say that there are 41 tribes that have USDA approved hemp plans. So that's what's unique and different between a tribe and a private farm, is that the tribe itself gets approved as a governance authority over hemp grows on tribal lands. And so once that had been put into place, it now allows for tribes to develop a hemp plan that's approved through the United States USDA. Once that's approved, then the tribe is now able to grow or to provide licenses to members or any others to grow on their tribal lands. And so many tribes see this and have seen this as an opportunity for diversifying their economic development. And I think what's important for those that are listening today is that most tribes and tribal governments have what land that's trust land is what it's called. It's really held by the federal government on behalf of the tribe, and on those lands, the tribe has the rights and authorities to do whatever they see fit, as long as it doesn't break federal law. And so many tribes are in the agricultural space, just from a historical and cultural traditional value system. And in the modern sense, there's also the importance of water rights. Water rights travel with the agricultural lands through the relationships with the federal government. So the 41 tribes that have approved plans are all at some stage of beginning to farm. And the opportunity, there's twofold opportunities that have come up, and I don't want to get too deep into, I know our time's limited, but from an agricultural perspective, because the plant is one that utilizes water, it allows tribes to leverage their water rights and to manage their water appropriately. It also, because it's a growth industry that has industrial opportunities, many tribes see the industrial opportunity, whether it's hempcrete or wallboard or even leveraging the fuel opportunity from the plants themselves as well. So there's the industrial side of the hemp that many tribes are interested in for long-term planting and growing. And then there's the CBD opportunity, which, just like in the private sector, the opportunity was really generated out of the explosion of the CBD medical industry and the medical opportunities, because most tribes are very conservative. And so they see the medicinal value and opportunity and not necessarily interested in the marijuana space as much as they are in the hemp space and its medical properties with the CBD. So in general, and I'll close out with this, there are multiple tribes right now taking advantage of the getting their rights to plant on their tribal lands, and also looking to partner with industry players and like yourselves and everyone who's here that's interested. Tribes are interested in having good partnerships, as are most of you all in the farming or in the space. And then also, I think what's as important as that is that tribes have some regulatory authority where they have some economic advantages, and that they don't have to pay federal taxes and employment taxes and those kinds of things as it relates to the hemp industry, or any industry for that matter. But so that gives them a bit of an advantage with regards to the economics. And so I'm really proud that Bluestone has worked with 5 tribes to help them with building out their hemp capacity, and have been honored this will continue to grow. It's a trend. I think what becomes important is where you all as mainstream folks that are in the industry, wherever it's going with regards to your priorities and what you see the opportunities are, tribes will want to partake and participate in those opportunities as well. So there's a great agricultural opportunity. There's a traditional value systems opportunity, and then there's also the medicinal value, which many tribes see the value of the traditional plant medicines, which hemp and
so Jamie, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear from Nate now and see, Nate, Jamie covered a lot of things there. What was really the resonator for you guys at San Carlos Apache to jump into this industry as regulators and operators?
I think moving forward with us, or starting off the whole process, was really the want of the tribe itself. Even though we do have a very conservative council, they see a holistic approach to medicine as something that's positive, and being able to Jamie was able to let them fully realize that there are a lot of effects that would help, and that helped spur us to move forward with this. We've had a farming history in the past. We have a very large cattle industry that is supported by our farms, and we went into the water rights that actually go with that. So it helps in twofold of we maintain our farming abilities and use our water rights to what they were intended for. So with that, we decided to move some of the acreage away from cotton and alfalfa, which had been grown in the past, to hemp. And we looked at that with the 22 acres of hemp to start off as more of a proof of concept than necessarily a key economic driver. But as we see, as we move forward, it definitely will be. And that's how we started the process.
Was there an educational hurdle that had to be overcome with, working with tribal elders in terms of getting them on board for something like this, which has a little bit of controversy in its associations?
Yeah, they're an older group, and they see anything that has to do, if you say cannabis or hemp, it's all marijuana and it's all illegal and you're not supposed to do it. It was a tough sledding to get it to fruition, I believe, and Jamie played a key role. He was the one that really started it, and we moved in with my office to help administrate the whole thing in general. Yeah, it's an arduous process with them.
How do you guys look at this going forward in terms of business operations, as tribal operation running the business side too?
And that's the other thing that is completely different than going with a private enterprise.
Yeah, please.
The farm is the governance of it, the using it as more of a government arm than an actual business, and the process of purchasing goes through very slow, as the government does go through. And the need to speed up that process was something we're looking at right now, because purchasing seeds on time, getting equipment rented, because a lot of this is not traditional stuff that we were used to purchasing or getting, and making people understand that these are specialty products and they need to be sole sourced or something to go through the procurement process was really tough. And planning on reservations will have to take a year in advance to make sure it stays on top of everything and all the proper signatures are there, all the I's are dotted. It's an arduous process. And that caused us to hit a lot of delays, which really hurt us. Getting things planted, making sure everything was there. Purchasing equipment that we didn't know that we needed quickly was a really big hassle. And even to getting labor in there to actually go through the whole process of having to be a tribal employee, even as an emergency hire, would still take almost a month, when private enterprise, you can get somebody that same day or the next day. And that really hurt us in the grow time, making sure we could get all the weeding and everything need to be done for the whole process.
Yeah, I think those are great points. Operational organization is key, for obviously the tribal business, but for all hemp businesses. So I think that's really good advice that we struggled with when we had a farm, and others are constantly going under the pressure of. So making sure you're prepared, making sure that money is there, and kind of hitting the ground running, right?
Yeah, especially with farming, I've learned is that the seasons move as the seasons move. You need to react with them, and being able to get that properly set up ahead of time is really key to making sure this goes through properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Jamie, I'd love to ask you again to jump in here and comment on back to the governmental side in terms of USDA working alongside tribal governments. How's that conversation been? Is it open, productive discussion in terms of getting things rolling for tribes?
Yeah, actually it is, because the USDA is in alignment, and as USDA is one of the federal agencies that's worked directly with tribes for many, probably, ever since the founding of the relationship. And so there's a strong tribal network within USDA that works specifically to support tribal. As I said, farming is a traditional part of most tribal systems. And so there's a strong relationship there. There's also some laws in place that provide some timelines to there's a 60-day timeline for the USDA to approve and plan that a tribe submits. And one thing that becomes important here, I think, just along with what Mr. Nash brought up, is that you know, when a tribal system is moving forward into this type of industry, it's because they see it as a long-term opportunity. They're not, you know, tribes are here forever. They're not going anywhere. They've been here time eternal and intend to stay that way. So the movement of tribes into the industry is an important showcase of, you know, the opportunity as a long-term industry. And that's both CBD and what it's been able to do as far as, you know, turning the lights on, I guess, for everybody in the industry. And then really the longer term play is the industrial hemp, the opportunities for hemp as an example. Nathan brought up that San Carlos Apache tribe has a strong history of cattle ranching. They're known for that. And, you know, is there an opportunity to leverage the hemp as a feed for the cattle? You know, is there what are the opportunities that we're not currently thinking of that hemp can be used as, because it has so many, you know, values to it? And so the USDA, just back to the original question, is USDA is committed to supporting tribes in this space, because it's now, of course, supported federally, and all of you and the states that you're at, you know, most of the states are on board and have their own plans in place as well. So I think probably the biggest challenge is just logistics and making sure that there's relationships with each of the states for transport, and, you know, those things are still needing to be worked out across the country,
Right.
whether it's a tribe or not. But, you know, just making sure that some of those practical points of distribution and also the you know, conversion of the hemp product into a final product.
Yep.
Still new in the tribal space.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's awesome. Nate, let's end with you real quick in about 20 seconds or so. I want to stay on track here, but what are you guys looking forward to most with this season and with your program going forward in the future here?
Yeah, as we're going forward, we really want to invest more and push into it. As Jamie said, the milling and breaking down to isolates is something we want to start pushing forward in, and also being able to maintain a level of potency so we can get more of a uniformed mass when we produce all of that into the whole market, and create a story and a brand behind our own seeds and our own milling of the whole thing. That's our biggest goal for this year.
Fantastic. Well, hey, we wish you the best of luck. Thanks for being a part of the industry, and we're wishing the tribe a lot of success. Jamie, thanks for joining us as well, and hope you guys have success with our tribes to be implementing.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Fantastic. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks for sticking with us here, guys. We have, you know, pretty much everyone's still hanging around. It's awesome. I'm glad you're staying with us for this awesome sprint through hemp regulations. Again, just want to thank our sponsors, CAI and MicaSense, before we bring out our last session here with the state of Iowa. So I'm going to introduce them right now. We have Robin Pruser from the state of Iowa, and then Sarah Wells from Trace will be moderating what will be an awesome discussion. Guys, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Hey everyone, happy to be here today. I'm Sarah Wells. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer over at Trace, and I'm going to be speaking with Robin today. Robin, I'll let you give yourself a quick introduction, and then I'll go through a little bit of your bio as we get into some of our questions.
Thanks, Sarah. I've been here at the Iowa Department of Agriculture for almost 20 years now. I am the state entomologist, state seed control official, USDA recognized state plant regulatory official. We also oversee noxious weeds in the state of Iowa, and I'm the ag security coordinator also for the department. So my latest new role is the Iowa Hemp Administrator, and that has given me an opportunity to write administrative rules and form law from the ground up, and that is not something you often get to do.
Right. You know, I had to laugh when I was first looking at your LinkedIn bio. It mentions that you are the hemp program administrator among about 450 other things that you do. And that definitely became very apparent as we were chatting yesterday with all the different areas of expertise that you have that you bring to the hemp industry. So really excited to dig into a few questions with you here today. Just want to give our audience a quick overview of what the farming landscape is in Iowa, just how big of an industry it is for the state. Now, from what I understand, over 85% of the state's land is dedicated to farming. So of 26 million acres, there's over 22 million acres dedicated really just to corn and soybeans alone. And then with hemp being passed and legalized in 2019 in Iowa, and 2020 being the state's first growing season, Iowa was able to grow 680 acres of hemp. Now, I did the math, and that's not even close to 1,000th of a percentage point of corn and soybean production. So as we get into looking at hemp in the state of Iowa, what would you walk us through Iowa's entrance into the hemp space? What sparked statewide entrance or buy-in to enter the market? And then what are some of the key points or nuances as to how your program has been structured that might be helpful to call out in terms of the scope of your program oversight or sampling testing requirements that we discussed, and anything else you'd like to mention?
Sure thing. So once Kentucky got into the hemp game, our legislature had members that were watching it very closely for probably 5 years prior to hemp becoming legal. Bills were introduced every year during our session, but didn't make it all the way to the finish line. So 2019, we finally passed the Iowa Hemp Act, which then kind of put us in, I call it hanging out purgatory, because we had to wait for that interim rule to take effect before we could actually go forward. That made for a really interesting situation because the Iowa law was here and then the interim rule came and they didn't necessarily match up perfectly. So we've had to do some tweaking and just kind of roll with it as we go. Now that we're looking at the final rule being implemented later this month, and I did just talk to USDA and they said that it is looking very good, that it will be implemented as promised on time. Again, we have to tweak our rule and our administrative, or I should say our law and our administrative rules so that we can adopt those good things for producers that are in that final rule. And so now that we've got that thumbs up from USDA, we'll be working very quickly to do that, including getting our state plan updated and approved by USDA. You threw a lot of subjects at me to talk about, and I have like the memory of a rock. And so keep pushing me along as to what you want me to talk about.
No worries, no worries. So just, acknowledging that the Iowa agricultural market is so embedded in corn and soybean, with these massive numbers of acreage being dedicated to those commodities. What was the incentive for Iowa State to really get into the hemp market? And then from what I've understood about how you've set up your program, it's different from other states in the scope that you are regulating for your oversight, and that you're really just focusing on the farmers. And so I was wondering if you could talk us through that little setup of it.
Sure. So it's really hard to get into farming here in the state of Iowa unless you were born into it. The cost of farmland, the cost of that infrastructure, of all of the equipment that you need to farm is very, very high. So and the people that farm are farming thousands of acres unless they also have off-farm employment. So those folks have a really high cost dedicated infrastructure to that corn and soybean market. At the same time, this was all coming up, our corn and soybean prices were not fantastic here in the state of Iowa. So a lot of people were looking for some type of crop to bring in that may offer more profitability on some type of smaller scale. So a unique restriction that we have in the state of Iowa is that you may only grow a maximum of 40 acres. And so they did that to help balance the risk of this high risk crop and the fact that we're getting in late. We didn't want well-seasoned producers from outside of Iowa to be able to come in and just own the market from the get-go. And so by limiting it to 40 acres, that doesn't make it real attractive for out-of-state people to come to Iowa and get started. And it gives our producers here an opportunity to get going. I would break our growers segment down kind of into two. We have those seasoned row crop producers who are farmers. And then you've got that other set of growers who have maybe grown a garden or tomatoes in the backyard, and they are starting on a very small scale, oftentimes on a small little bit of borrowed land or even their backyard. And it's been very interesting working with the both of them. Now, with that being said, we are seeing futures on corn and soybeans rise. And so it'll be interesting to see what our traditional row crop producers actually do. Will they stick with dedicating a few acres over to hemp, or are they going to roll that back into their corn and soybean production for, at this point in time, they could do a guaranteed profit on that land?
So what has their feedback been after the 2020 growing season? You had 680 acres planted, overall, how did the season go in terms of, I would say, compliant crop versus hot crop, lessons learned there? And what is initial feedback from your farmers on, is hemp worth it?
We put out a survey at the end of the growing season, and if you go to our website, iowaagriculture.gov/hemp, you can actually download that survey and see all of their responses. I would say that this first year was a huge learning curve for everybody. We did have some producers that partnered with out-of-state folks that brought that knowledge here to them and gave them a leg up. I would say a majority of our producers, they went on the wing and the prayer and read a lot of stuff online and gave it a whirl. Of the 123 initial tests, pre-harvest tests that we conducted, we had 13% that failed. And frankly, for a high number of the acres, we didn't do a great job of tracking exact acres this first year out. We learned a lot about record keeping. But we had nearly 70 acres, I think, in our first 3 hot tests that were taken down. And so that was a large acreage for us, which rolls right into my advice to producers is, I think a valuable lesson learned is that they have to do that in-season commercial testing so they know where they're at on their THC content so that they can do that harvest date. We also really struggled in Iowa with weed control. We grow everything really well in Iowa, including weeds. And so we have things out there like lamb's quarter and amaranth that will grow easily 3 inches a day. So if you plant hemp seed and you've got that first 30 days where it's pretty slow in growing, our weeds are coming up really fast. And without any labeled herbicides, as well as processors oftentimes want the crop to be grown in an organic manner, we are really struggling, kind of having to go back in time with mechanical weed control and a lot of manual weed control that people here in the state of Iowa aren't accustomed to doing anymore.
Right. Well, and that, brings up a lot of interesting points, I think, as farmers are weighing the potential opportunity versus the risk analysis of getting into the hemp space. You have really 3 considerations that we've discussed here. One it's the intricacies of the plant, keeping it from going hot, as well as the details of just how to grow it, the labor that goes into keeping the weeds out to actually harvesting the plant as you go through, and then providing creating an adequate marketplace for the plant and the crop itself to where prices can actually support this for these farmers. So, with 2021 in the midst of this, and as we move into 2022 growing seasons, what is some key advice that you have for farmers to make sure that they are set up for success to the best of their abilities, or at least mitigating their risks up front? We talked quite a bit about that yesterday.
Yeah, this is going to sound really crazy to the states that are way ahead of Iowa, but I actually have to tell people, you don't just grow hemp and then decide later what you're going to do with it, like we do with our typical corn and soybeans. You actually have to know up front, am I growing for those cannabidiol? Am I growing for grain? And it's done differently. So this sounds really elementary, but we are still back at that level here, at the beginning of this hemp crop in the state of Iowa. I tell people not to plant hemp unless you have a buyer and a good contract to sell it. Again, in Iowa, we're accustomed to growing our crops. You don't have to sell them ahead of time, and there's always a market available for them. And because hemp is such a new crop, we do not have that type of market system here in the state of Iowa for hemp. Big lesson learned, like I already mentioned, is you have to commercially test during the season to know where you're at THC content. And finally, this people look at me kind of squinty-eyed when I tell them this, but I tell people, do not invest more in hemp in Iowa than you can afford to set fire to. This is still a high-risk crop. We don't have great markets developed on a local level here in the state of Iowa. There are multiple pinch points in the growing season as well as the drying for you to entirely lose your crop. And so don't get in over your head at this point in time. I think, yeah.
I was just going to say, just to call out, you know, what are some of those key pinch points to be aware of? Now, we're all aware of the 0.3%. We wish it was raised to 1%. We'll cross our fingers for some time in the future. But in addition to that 0.3%, what are some of those key pinch points to really be focused on as an operator?
We still are really looking for those uniform, stable, good genetics. In more than one instance, we had voluntary destruction this year because they could not get their crop to establish, whether it be it couldn't outcompete the weeds, whether it be that it was a poor germinating seed. We had a lot of issues there, and producers gave up and threw in the towel. You have to harvest it and you have to dry it properly. And I think that people really overlook those harvesting manual labor aspects of it. I'm only aware of one of our 86 licensees this year that actually harvested mechanically. Everyone else harvested by hand. And then you have to make sure your crop doesn't mold. And so I just think that there's a lot of little agronomic intricacies here, as well as the fact that we have millions and millions of acres of corn and soybean. And the insects and diseases that greatly impact our normal crops also impact our hemp. Maybe also without great ways of controlling those pests here on hemp crops in Iowa.
So thinking about some of those kind of ancillary opportunities for hemp, or looking more at hemp biomass, the industrial crop, what are some of the larger marketplace opportunities for hemp? Or maybe we've overextended our assumptions of what hemp can do. Where can we be focused in these bigger sectors, bigger marketplace opportunities of how we can think about getting creative with use cases for hemp without over-promising, you know, its ability as a rotational crop or the magic replacement material for every plastic and cotton object that we have?
I think that is the Willy Wonka gold ticket question, is finding a use for our products, whether it be the cannabidiol, whether it be the seed oil, whether it be the fiber and the grain. We raise an enormous amount of livestock here in the state of Iowa, #1 in pork production. You can actually take the next 3 states, total up their pork production, and it doesn't come close to what we're raising in Iowa.
Wow.
So if it could become a legal feed ingredient, so that's the first step for commercial feed. The second step then is that it has to economically and nutritionally compete with our traditional livestock feedstuffs of corn and soybeans. So we can feed it all day long to cattle and to hogs and to chickens and whatever it may be. But if it is not giving that profitability to the producer doesn't even see it as an option to them, because margins are so thin at this time. With soybean, used to be considered a weed crop. When it was first introduced into the United States, producers looked at it like, I do not want this on my farm. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So you had commodity organizations that formed, and they invested a literal ton of money into developing those markets, developing those products that consumers want and consumers are willing to purchase repeatedly at a price that works for everybody in that production system. And I think with hemp, we are not yet to that point, and it needs a lot of development.
And, you know, with just about kind of 1 minute left on the clock here for us, I kind of want to throw out a zinger just for your personal opinion, as much as you are able to share on the 1% THC limit and how it impacts, you know, the hemp industry. How much of this is we need to take the training wheels off and let this market really go and remove that limit? Do we move it up to 1%? How critical is that in your opinion?
I feel like it would allow people to produce more, a higher percentage of cannabidiol in their crop. In my experience, we always push everything to the very last limit. So right now it's at 0.3% and everybody is trying to push it right up to that very last limit. If we move the finish line, we're just going to again be pushing it up to that very last limit. But I think it would also give us some good freedom on potential other varieties that would also work because the 0.3 is so low.
Great. Gives our operators a lot more flexibility, not only to remain compliant, but to increase some scale and growth in their own operations without such finite oversight or I'm sorry, detailed oversight. But anyways, great. Thank you so much, Robin. Really appreciate your input and your insights. And Steve, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, Robin. Appreciate you guys. That was fantastic, really informative. I'd like to give a shout out to Iowa for being our second Hemp Overview customer. They were launching very, very shortly, which we're really excited about. And I want to thank all of our speakers and states today who joined the conversation. Like I said at the beginning, we think it's a really important conversation to be having with these state regulators to understand the nuances, the problems, the solutions they're seeing on the ground level of this industry, and really facilitating the growth from a pro-business perspective. Some of the takeaways, that's one of the takeaways to take away from this event is that if you're a farmer on the call here, reach out to your state regulators. They're here to assist you. They're fighting the battles, whether you know it or not, to get the USDA to, ease regulation and then provide pro-business rulings to assist, our seasons, right? Whether it's remediation or THC levels like we discussed. They're here to help. And like we talked about with CAI, one of our sponsors, the FDA or Department of Health in these states are coming along too. So don't shy away from conversations with them, engage them in conversation, be a thought leader, be a steward of the industry to help educate them. And in turn, receive favorable regulations back to help the industry grow and not to hamper it. I'd love to point out a couple things, I learned today that I thought were really good takeaways. The concept of tried and true quality over quantity in terms of hemp production on the CBD side, the need to innovate and scale on the industrial side of the applications of hemp. The idea of testing throughout the season is a really important one that I've learned, hands-on, and that a lot of people have spoken to make sure your crop is compliant and you're tracking it throughout the year. And if you really want to get into this, doing the hard work before you start the business, before you make those big investments to work with a buyer and make sure some contracts are in place to give you a little bit of stability as you transition from other crops through to hemp as a new addition to your farming practices. So with that, I want to thank again our sponsors. We had CAI with us as well as MicaSense. Thank you to all our moderators who did a phenomenal job. Again, to our speakers, also did a phenomenal job. And we're hoping to, continue to bring more media coverage of these conversations to you guys throughout this year and going onward. So stay tuned to, see more from us in terms of, hosting and facilitating these important conversations. I want to thank Dodie Handy from Wall Street Writer, who's helped on the back end of this and put so many things together and a lot of long nights. Thank you to our entire back of the house team that worked on the production of this webinar. It was fantastic and a very smooth experience, probably the smoothest webinar that I have facilitated. So I'm very grateful for that and hope everyone watching is too. And thank you, to AgEagle for facilitating this. It's a pleasure and a privilege for me to be a part of the team and to grow the hemp side of our business. And AgEagle is a company who continue to empower the drone age. So we're excited to continue down these important roads and happy that you guys could join us. So with that, I want to bring back Michael Droz, CEO of AgEagle, to send us home. Michael, what did you think of today?
Oh, that was phenomenal, guys. Great job. This is I've been on a lot of webinars, and this was actually incredibly informative for me. So I really appreciate everybody. And Steve, great job putting this together. The entire team who put this together did a great job. It's very smooth. I do want to express our gratitude to the speakers today, Brian, Holly, Nathan, Robin, Doris, and all the others who shared. I think it was really, really informative. And I felt like personally I learned a lot myself, which is always great. To note to everybody, we do have this recorded event, and it's available on our website, ageagle.com. It should be up tomorrow if you guys want to download the recording. Feel free also to distribute to others. This is all about education, teaching people about what's happening in the industry, and we want to do our part in sharing as much information as possible. With that, I hope you all have a great, great season this year. And I thank you all for joining today and look forward to our next one. Goodbye, everyone.